Welcome to the Economy Magazine at I-24 News, where we provide a daily view on the world markets and the global economy. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Well, coming up today, Turkey's Erdogan reasserts power in national elections. The AKP party sweeping an unexpected victory on Sunday, giving it majority control in parliament. The Turkish lira and stocks soared on this win, but what's the long-term impact on the economy? Let's start now with the headlines. Well, Asian stocks fell across the board on Monday after investors digested more lackluster news on China's economy. China's official Purchasing Managers Index, or PMI, came in at 49.8 for October on Sunday, indicating contraction for a third straight month. Well, Japan's Nikkei dropped over 2%, the Hang Seng over 1.19%, and China's Shanghai declined 1.66%. In Europe, meanwhile, strong earnings from HSBC boosted sentiment. Germany's DAX up 0.71% and France's CAC up 0.37% by midday. London's FTSE slid 0.26% by midday. U.S. stock futures, meanwhile, pointed to a higher open. Well, the leaders of South Korea, Japan, and China on Sunday vowed to work towards greater economic integration. In their first joint meeting in over 3 years, the trio also said that they would resume annual meetings, which had been suspended since 2012. Japan's ties with South Korea and China have been troubled, largely due to the perception by Seoul and Beijing that Tokyo hasn't done enough to atone for its wartime atrocities. China, in the meantime, has been a key advocate of RCEP, which would create the globe's largest free trade bloc of 3.4 billion people.
I believe there is unlimited potential in economic cooperation between the three countries. With this precious chance, I hope the leaders and the businessmen from the three countries work together to build a new economic order in and around Northeast Asia.
The EU is putting down an extra 28 million euros to help Jordan support Syrian refugees. The EU Commissioner for Humanitarian Affairs and Crisis Management made that announcement on Sunday. Well, this brings the overall humanitarian assistance provided by the EU since the start of the crisis to 198 million euros. According to the UNHCR, more than 600,000 refugees are currently registered in Jordan. Most live in urban areas, and some 100,000 Syrians reside in refugee camps.
This money will assist for the urgent needs of Syrian refugees and their host communities.
And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will take control of the economy ministry in order to fast-track Israel's nat gas ambitions. This after the economy minister offered his resignation. Aryeh Deri had opposed waiving normal antitrust laws in order to fast-track approval of the framework deal, which would allow the development of huge nat gas deposits found off Israel's coast. The move now enables Netanyahu to add the economy ministry under his portfolio, allowing him to give final approval to the framework reached back in August between Texas-based Noble Energy and Israel's Delek Group.
This will bring hundreds of billions of shekels to the Israeli coffers over the next 20 years, to the citizens of Israel, to the welfare budget, to the education budget, to the health budget, and this is very important for the country.
And the Islamist-rooted AKP party, founded by Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan, clinches a stunning victory in national elections on Sunday, winning a majority control in the parliament. Here's more in this next report.
In Turkey, against all odds, the AKP, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's party, not only won Sunday's elections, but regained its absolute majority, which was lost in June.
I think this is a good development for Turkey. A single-party government always have a positive effects on markets and economy.
The victory of the AKP has been welcomed by a rebound in the Turkish lira and the Istanbul Stock Exchange, but some remain skeptical because the economy remains very fragile. While growth was close to 10% in the mid-2000s, today it no longer exceeds 3%. As for inflation, it's reached 8%, with real estate being the area most hit. Prices have risen 2 times faster than wages. And on the unemployment front, the figures are not much better. Nearly 1 in 10 workers is unemployed.
How they will tackle the economic problems, because Turkey is at the end of the road, how they will tackle the entire deliquescence of the Turkish bureaucracy, how they will tackle the education system and research and development, etc., etc.
The Syrian war is partly responsible for the slowdown, and with it, the massive influx of refugees into Turkey, a crisis that has already cost $7 billion, according to the government. But there is also the resumption of the country's conflict with Kurds seeking autonomy in the southeast of the region.
Where institutions are rocked by instability, it's normal for there to be economic problems. Investment is uncertain. No one wants to buy materials, buildings, or a home, which obviously stalls business.
And in the long run, it is hard to tell what Turkey's economic reality will look like in the coming years with so many external factors at play. But the strengthening of power in Erdogan's purview and a perceived drift toward authoritarianism in Turkey may be a worrisome sign for investors as well as onlookers.
Well, for further insight now on the Turkish elections and the economic ramifications, we are joined by Laura Wells, independent journalist in Istanbul. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, tell us, what's the mood like on the streets right now?
Society, so about 50% of the population which voted for the AK Party is absolutely jubilant. They see the vision of the new Turkey as described by President Erdogan as imminent. And the other 50% of the population is in general beside itself. People are mourning the loss of what they thought would be a Turkish republic. So it's just a very mixed mood. I will say, with all of the crackdowns on the critics of the government, most recently, even last week, a large holding company tied to the former ally, now mortal enemy, described as a terrorist group in Turkey, the Imam Gulen, who's based in the United States. It's a big holding company called Koza İpek. Their companies are down the most in the stock market today, which has seen an amazing 5.5% gain, the most since 2008. Also, Doğan Holding Company, which owns critical media, that is also down 19% today and was even halted in trading because of such precipitous losses. So many people are anticipating companies like these, as Koza İpek was taken overseas by the government last week, allegedly for funding the Imam Gulen's network of schools and other charities, also considered, again, a terrorist group. And Doğan Media, which owns entities like CNN Turk, Hürriyet newspaper, which was one of the largest, they have an English publication, Hürriyet Daily News, they believe that this government will probably continue these crackdowns and continue lawsuits, even against people on social media who are critical of the government. And so there is some fear of that 50% who did not vote for AK Party.
Right. Well, you do mention some of these market moves, some of them currently dipping, but the lira did respond positively to the election results. And Turkey's economy has been hit hard recently. Tell us, what will the effects of this election have on the overall economy, both in the short and the long term?
Well, absolutely. The lira today was one of the biggest gainers in the world, at one point the biggest gainer in currencies, up about 5%. It did pare back its gains a little bit, about 3.5%. But as soon as the result was known last night in Asian trading, it was up about 3%. So I think short term, we'll see a nice bounce. Medium and long term, most people, even if they do not care for the AK Party, believe it is good for the economy. They believe that the gains will continue. That being said, there's a lot of corporate debt, about 50% to GDP. That's a problem since the lira has weakened tremendously in the past couple of years, down about 100% versus the dollar. So it's very difficult to service that debt. So we'll just see if this government has more tricks to pull out of its hat. Formerly, it had continued the EU accession talks. It had made sure that these reforms in accounting and other laws and bylaws for companies and sectors had been institutionalized. Therefore, they got a lot of foreign investment. That has fallen also precipitously. 2007, we're looking at $22 billion worth of foreign investment. 2014, that was at $12.5 billion, and it's going to probably be a fraction of that in 2015. So there's a lot of work for the AK Party. But again, even critics of this government have told me that if anyone can do it, it probably is the AK Party.
Interesting. Well, what do you think that this turnout will now have on already sour relations between Israel and Turkey?
That's a great question. I spoke with a very prominent businesswoman in Turkey who is Jewish, and the family's been here for hundreds of years. I'd asked her that particular question, as well as some other Jewish people that I have met in Turkey. They say that behind closed doors, Turkey and Israel do have decent relations. There is a line of communication. It's managed right now by some of the most powerful Jewish Turkish citizens. That comes as a surprise to a lot of people, but this particular businesswoman said that AK Party was using anti-Semitic rhetoric for populism, that it was popular. Whether it's popular or not, it's very difficult for so many people in Turkey to accept. It's really ugly speech, but certainly the Jewish population here is not the only one. The AK Party and the officials, even including President Erdogan, has said very bad things also against Christians, Greeks, Georgians, Armenians. So apparently this is populist rhetoric that works for a certain segment of the Turkish population. Also, if you look at Israel and Turkish trade, that has only increased despite the fact that diplomatic relationship publicly was broken. This government is very pragmatic. They have disagreed with Iran in Syria. They've disagreed with Russia in Syria, and yet they have continued to grow trade with those countries. So I think you'll continue to see that trend with trade, and probably there will be a thawing in these diplomatic relations now that they have secured power and don't need these populist measures to gain votes.
Well, interesting point. Thank you very much, Laura Wells. Very much appreciated from Istanbul.
Thank you.
And now for the stories we didn't want you to miss. We are joined on set by Daniel Roth. Thanks for being with us. What did you bring?
I brought, first of all, a story about Baltimore. Baltimore, unlike many cities, not just in the U.S., but around the world, is actually reaching out and looking to bring in refugees. So this sounds like it may be placing a burden on an already
tough neighborhood.
Tough neighborhood, yeah, we can put it that way. If viewers have watched The Wire, for example, this popularized the image of Baltimore as a working class, it's sort of dangerous place. And actually, what the mayor of Baltimore is trying to do is to draw in 10,000 new families over the next couple of years. They've seen their population cut down by a third since 1950. So this is a really important thing for them, is to sort of build back up their population, build back up their tax base, and build back up their productivity as a city that was a big port town, a big factory town, and is now a really hard place to live.
Right, and near Washington, D.C., the capital of the U.S.
Yeah, it is. It's next to Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. also experienced similar trends over the second half of the 20th century. What is known in the U.S. as white flight, sort of white population moving to the suburbs, taking with them their incomes and leaving in the inner cities. This is how the term inner city came up. Sort of depressed schools, depressed neighborhoods, depressed infrastructure.
Baltimore planning to provide financial incentives for the refugees?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of money that refugees get and that cities get in the U.S. when they take in refugees. 2,000 Syrian refugees came last year, or rather this year. Next year, there's a commitment to bring 10,000, is the word on the street.
And what else did you bring?
So the second story is about Uber. On one hand, in Germany, Uber is facing a tough road. They've already had to pull back in cities, Hamburg, Frankfurt, Dusseldorf. In Canada, though, they're actually driving down the cost of taxis. In Toronto, the base price for a taxi already dropped by $1. So We're seeing kind of mixed blessings for Uber, depending on the country and depending on the sort of political reaction, whether they're seeing success or whether they're having to sort of pull back.
And it is fascinating here, the different reactions that we're seeing in the States versus Europe.
Absolutely. I think there's, in Europe, there's a real sort of tenseness around this idea of taking away jobs from taxi drivers. In the States and Canada, it's similar, but we're seeing a lot more readiness to allow this. The question is, will salaries for taxi drivers and Uber drivers be livable wages, or will they be struggling to survive? And that's really at the core of the question of whether Uber and taxis and what's going to happen down the road.
Perhaps it all just boils down to regulation. Thanks as ever for being with us. That wraps up our show today. Stay tuned here every day for all your business coverage from the Jaffa Port in Tel Aviv. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Thanks for watching.